Try that again. Good morning. We're going to be in Genesis 37, 38, and 39. We're going to do 38 slightly out of order, finishing up some questions from last week, Lesson 19. Does anybody need a copy of Lesson 20? We're glad to have some visitors among us. Yes. And a good number of our own. A few who are out sick today. All right. So as you can see, we're in a study of the patriarchs, in a study of Genesis, and we are nearing the end of the story. We're going to finish the book of Genesis by the end of this year. So you would expect that as we're getting close to December, that we're winding down. Since Genesis chapter 12, we've been in this time period of the patriarchs, right? That symbol for the patriarchs in our 17 time periods. And so Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have received the promises that they would be given a land, that they would be made into a great nation, and that through their seed all the nations of the earth would be blessed. And so we've seen a number of stories now about them sojourning in the land. So they're in a land that is not their own. They don't own the land. And have they become a great nation? We've started to see perhaps the beginnings of that because now Jacob is the first of the three who has many sons, right? He's got 12 sons at this point. And so you start to see, okay, maybe now we're going to see some exponential growth to this family that thus far has been surprisingly small. Where it's like even Abraham was saying, you know, okay, you've said my descendants are going to be like the stars of the heavens and the sand on the shore, but I don't even have a son. And then he received one son of promise. And then we know that he did bear more children later. But God only needed one to fulfill that promise. And so I feel like as we transition now to the story of Joseph, someone who's reading this perhaps for the first time starts to see the how, right? God has given these promises to these three patriarchs, and now we're going to see how he's going to make them into a great nation, how he's going to give them this land. Is this an unoccupied territory that he's going to give them? No, it's full of other people. And so there's a need to miraculously give them this land because by sheer numbers they could never take it themselves. So we're going to see how that story unfolds, and we know it quite well. In last week's lesson there was just a few related stories, and Brother Waldron made the decision to pull chapter 38 ahead because it kind of interrupts the flow of a story of Joseph. So just to complete that story, chapter 38 is about Judah and Tamar, which is a tragic story, a story full of sinful behavior, but we'll see kind of how it fits in and why the Holy Spirit chooses to include it. So what were the two ways that Judah sinned against his daughter-in-law, Tamar?
Well,
Dad?
he had promised her to give his son Sheila as a husband. And then when Sheila got old enough, that didn't happen. And then also he committed fornication with her.
That's right. So he starts out by not doing what he should do. This, of course, is before the law of Moses, but you see how old this tradition or expectation was that you give your son to a widowed daughter-in-law so that she can raise up an heir for him. And of course, her first husband was evil and God took his life. The second husband or the second son of Judah was unwilling to do that for her, and so God takes his life. So there you see God, that was an expectation of God that he did not obey. And now this son, what was the excuse? Why didn't Judah give him?
Sure he didn't die.
Oh, is that true?
She she dresses up as a harlot.
She does. That's you're getting ahead of me a little bit. I'm almost there. But why didn't Judah give his third son? Well, I think that's the underlying reason, right? His excuse is he's too young, right? And so he's too young to give in marriage, and so he says, just wait. I'll give him to you. But he doesn't, right? But there seems to be this fear. Fear of God, but it's not in the right place. Fear of God should motivate us to what? Moved with godly fear means obeying God, right? Not just I'm so terrified I'm not going to do what you say. There's lots of places we could go with that thought, but let me avoid getting too bogged down there. But what is God's reaction when we cause others to sin? Tamar's going to sin in this chapter, but it's Judah who causes it. It's God's reaction. I grabbed 2 verses out of Matthew slightly off. It's really 6 and 7 that talk about stumbling blocks. And what's God's opinion when we cause others to stumble? He hates it, right? He says if a person causes one of these little ones to stumble, then what?
Hung around your neck, drowned in the sea.
Right. Yeah, it'd be better simply for his life to have been ended, because God is not pleased. He loves each of his children, and when one causes another to stumble, God's very displeased. So God is going to be extremely displeased with Judah for this behavior. Okay? So we know the story where Tamar, because she has not been given a husband, she chooses to play the harlot. And so while Judah is out of town, she knows where he is, and so she takes off her widow's garments and puts on the attire of a harlot. And she goes and entices him. It doesn't say necessarily that he's not looking for this type of engagement. So he's certainly at sin, looking for a prostitute. She's in sin, going and making herself available as a prostitute. So a lot of wicked behavior. And we noted last week that ultimately he's not being a good leader of his family by taking them into this Canaanite environment. His friendships with the Canaanites, his marriage to a Canaanite, and so he's certainly leading his family away from God, and this is the result. But I think it's good to note the observation about our attire here, as we can infer some things from what Tamar does. What should we learn about how we should dress, just from Tamar's choices? Any thoughts, Norm?
Well, it's about packaging. People in the business understand the value of packaging and drawing people's eyes to their product through that packaging. And our clothes and our behaviors, outward behaviors, are our packaging. And they send signals and they draw certain types of people to us, whether that's in error or not, is from a standpoint of are you that kind of a person inside? It's the packaging that is the first thing that people see. And in Tamar's case, she knew it. She knew how to dress to package herself to be a prostitute, and she got exactly what she was trying to accomplish as a result of that.
Yeah, that's right. Any other thoughts on that? It becomes a lot more blurred in our society when the attire of a harlot, the packaging that Norm's talking about, is also what's in style, and it's all that's on the rack hanging at Walmart, right? And so you think, well, this is of course how I'm going to dress my little girl, because this is what they have available. In this day and age, it was, okay, here's the attire of a harlot, and here's the attire of a modest woman. And she knew exactly what to do to look like that. So we've got to be more thoughtful in an age where these things have been normalized and accepted. But it is very plain. It says, verse 15, chapter 38, verse 15, when Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, for she had covered her face. That was the tradition of their day, the way a harlot would behave. And so we should be careful to do the same. 1 Peter 3:1, what should others learn about us from our attire? 1 Peter 3:1 through 6 talks about modesty to some extent. What should people see from our attire? And this goes for men and women. Anybody have a thought, an inference from that text? Norm?
The emphasis is on behavior. And again, it's an outward show of what you want to show inwardly. And so the things that we do outwardly sometimes unconsciously show who we are, but we also can make an attempt to bring out, be honest with the world, with who we are by actually exhibiting that behavior and letting it flow, letting it come out. So if you're trying to be good and you want to be good and your character is wanting to develop that way, then be good and show that as an outward behavior.
Right. Yeah, it talks about, our adornment must not be external, braiding the hair, wearing gold jewelry, putting on dresses. It's not about what people see about your physical appearance. Let it be the hidden person of the heart, which with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. And it talks about even Sarah, taking it all the way back to these patriarchs, who used to adorn themselves in this way. So it's using the idea of adorning yourself with not the clothing, but the godly character. If our clothing gets in the way of our character, it's going to be a problem for us. I know I've shared this example once before, but a young lady came to a preacher and asked, why I'm really looking for a godly husband, and I seem to be attracting all the wrong types of guys. And he had to tell her, well, you're dressing immodestly, and men who are looking for a godly wife are steering clear. And men who are looking for that sort of thing are interested. So she was able to change her attire, and it did make a big difference in who she attracted. So we've got to remember some of those things. It's a good lesson we can take from Tamar. So the last question in last week's lesson, the result of this story is really the point. Who are the twin sons that are produced from this union? Of course, they do engage in fornication. Judah is completely unaware of who he has slept with. And it's not until later that Tamar, 3 months in, she's now showing. And so the family says she's played the harlot and she's with child. And she produces twins. Of course, Judah is discovered because she has asked him for these cords, these specific things, his staff and his cords. And she's able to say, I'm pregnant by this man, whoever owns these items. And it's obviously him. And so he is honorable from then on. He does not have relations with her again, but she is with child by him. And so the two children are who?
Zerah.
Perez and Zerah. That's right. And so these, what's the parallel story here that shows up once again?
Idea.
The supplanter idea. How so, April?
The one that they thought was going to be born first was actually born second. And so similar to Jacob and Esau.
Yeah. I don't know if this happens a lot. Seems to happen a lot in this family with the twins fighting for their way out. But I'm guessing this is from God because he's showing this theme. And so in the case of Jacob, the original supplanter, he was holding on to the heel of his brother, right? Trying to get ahead on the race to be first. In this case, the one who gets out first, does he win the race? No, he doesn't. His hand comes back in, and the other boy is born first, and that's Perez. And so Zerah, who should have won, he was practically there, ends up losing the race to be first. And so Perez does supplant his brother as the firstborn. And so which of these two is going to produce the Christ? We are studying the story of the Christ. So which one has the lineage? It's Perez, right? The one who supplants his brother once again. And so that's the connection to the rest of the story. If you go to Ruth, you see the genealogy down to David through Perez. If you go to Matthew, you see the whole genealogy from Abraham. Of course, it's also in Luke chapter 3 as well. Okay, any other questions or thoughts from chapter 38, lesson 19? All right, so let's talk about Joseph. Joseph is sold into Egypt. It's kind of hard to summarize sometimes the chapters that we're given for our weekly study, but that's the phrase literally out of Acts chapter 7. That's the way Stephen summarizes what happened to Joseph. He's sold into Egypt. And so let's talk about the circumstances that produce that scenario. You once again see in the family of Jacob this theme of favoritism. He's got 12 sons. And how do we see this theme show up once again?
His old age, Joseph.
Yeah, he's called the son of my old age, right? That's an interesting phrase. In what sense is he the son of Jacob's old age?
The last one, he's the next to last one out there of the 12.
Right. Yeah, there probably was a significant age gap between Joseph and Benjamin, where the other 11 sons are born during this time where they're with Laban, and born fairly quickly as the wives compete for children. And so there's Joseph being the youngest, the son of Rachel, who was his beloved wife. And then, of course, as Benjamin is still quite young, Joseph is 17 in this story. Now able to, be of service and use in the family economy. And so he's the favorite son. He's the youngest, and he's the son of Rachel. And so he's the favorite. And it's very obvious to his brothers that he is the favorite. What does he do?
He's a snitch.
Well, yeah, that's what Joseph does. That's true. But what does Jacob do? He makes him this coat of many colors, right? This very colored tunic. And we don't know exactly what that was, but that's probably a good idea of kind of what you see here. But it's this shoulder to a full-length tunic. And it was pointed out in Waldron that it's probably not the attire of one who's going to be working, right? You'd take this off in order to really get some work done. And so it seems to be an indication of promotion and leadership, that he's going to be directing others. And so Joseph, as Norm mentioned, you called him a snitch. And I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if I would call him a snitch. I think that's worth discussing for a moment. What caused Joseph's brothers to hate him? And then you'll see the hatred deepen as well. And was it justified? So what are your thoughts on that? If you were one of Joseph's brothers, did you have every right to hate this guy? The dreams made it worse, no doubt. It started with what Norm mentioned, that he brings back a bad report about his brothers. The sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah in verse 2, he's pasturing the flock with them, and he brings back a bad report. Of course, that's going to create some conflict between the brothers. However, it may be justified, right? If we don't know what his brothers were doing, but his father finds out, well, some of your sons are not to be trusted. These things that they're doing out in the field when they're not able to be seen by their father. It can contribute to the favoritism, to be honest, if Joseph, and what have we seen from Jacob's sons so far? Have you seen much righteousness from this bunch? No, we've seen Simeon and Levi, who are just full of vengeance and bringing this feeling of, I'm going to be odious to the people of the land because they go out and slaughter the people of Shechem. You see Judah's behavior with Tamar. Just a lot of, you see Reuben taking his father's wife as the concubine. And so just children that he can't really trust. Now you have the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah that haven't been involved in those stories yet, who have a bad report as well. And so to some extent, this favoritism may be because he's a boy I can trust. He's a boy who will do what I need and what I say.
This family has, a checklist of all the bad things that you could do as parents and leave. I mean, we're talking about stepbrothers from different wives and all of the different things going on there, which all cause animosity between one after the other. I mean, everything is just the opposite of what you would expect, and yet out of this, God's going to be able to use this crazy family for His plan.
Right. Yeah, we saw even when they were named by their 4 different mothers, right? The conflict that was a part of their birth, and now this conflict continues into their lives. And so, as Shirley mentioned, it deepens when he comes and tells them about his dreams. So this question I have is, was their hatred justified? He comes and tells them his dreams, and they're going to hate him for it. What were the dreams that he had? Dad?
The first one that you have illustrated there is where his sheaf was standing upright and the other 11 sheaves bowed down to his sheaf.
That's right. And it wasn't just, let's see. Yeah, they were able to interpret that fairly easily, weren't they? They said, are you going to reign over us? Or are you going to rule over us? And they hated him, verse 8, even more for his dreams and for his words. Now the second dream, which I don't have on the screen, was what? Norm?
The sun and the moon and the stars were bowing down to him, and that one got the parents' attention. Even Israel at this time, he's now saying, and even your mother and I.
That's right. How many stars was it? 11. Right, so there's a very specific number there, an obvious symbol. So we're going to see dreams throughout God's Word. I think this is the first. Well, we've seen the visions of Jacob, but these dreams that have some kind of a symbolic meaning for the future is being introduced here by God. And in later times, we're going to see the need for an interpreter. But here, boy, they didn't need an interpreter. They knew exactly what these dreams were representing. And so Joseph shares this dream with them, and it makes them hate him. Why is that still not a fair response?
Others is never justified.
Always wrong, yeah.
But it was immature and foolish of him maybe to share those dreams with them when they already hated him. He had to pick up on that. They could speak peaceably to them. Maybe not the best idea. Hey guys, you're going to be bowing down.
Yeah, it's maybe a little tone deaf, right? To maybe his EQ was low, as people talk about. The effect on the emotions. Norm?
Well, these came from God, so
Right.
I mean, he's there. They have some background for this kind of thing in their family. Israel certainly is aware of it because of his the dreams that he had early on, and it was direct communication with God. So you would expect that they would understand who this came from.
Just like we are looking for how this story is going to progress, that should have been the mindset of this chosen family, right? Even from Rebecca's first message from God when the two are battling in her womb, and then she receives this message, well, the older is going to serve the younger. And then, of course, Jacob, who receives the vision of the ladder, and he wrestles with an angel, and his name is changed to Israel. They are a chosen
family, and God is going to produce something great through them. And so, yes, there's 12 sons of Jacob, but one has been chosen here. And that's what the message of the dream is, that Joseph has been chosen to do something great. And the other 11, and even the two, the father and mother, bow down to Joseph. And so if they had a spiritual mindset, and we've been saying that all the way through these patriarchal stories, if they had a spiritual mindset, they would have understood this, but they missed that. And yet, to Jesse's original point, hatred is never justified. We kind of rushed through it on question 1, but favoritism caused this problem in the family. It can cause problems in the church. Great problems. Hatred of your brother is going to cause problems, and we need to never fall into this trap of, I already dislike this person, and then when they come and tell me something that I really don't like, now I hate them even more. Wishing something bad will happen to that person rather than something good. That's malice. That's ill will. Hoping that something bad will happen. Well, here, something good has happened. What do the scriptures teach us how should we react when something good happens to our brother? Rejoice with those who rejoice. I think of Jonathan when he's recognizing David as the one who's going to be the next chosen king. That's his position. He's the son of the king. But he's just happy that's God's choosing, and he wants to support David. So you don't see any humility. You see rebellion. And if you study Acts chapter 7, when Stephen's preaching his sermon to this rebellious group of Jews, that's why he pulls in the story of Joseph, because the patriarchs rebelled against God's chosen vessel in Joseph. And then we know they're going to rebel against God's chosen leader again with Moses. And just like them, you're just like your fathers, you stiff-necked, uncircumcised, who killed the prophets, and now you've killed the one who they prophesied about. So yeah, we see that in Joseph's family, in Jacob's family very early. So we talked about these two dreams. Now Jacob's reaction. Why do you think Jacob reacted the way he did? What do you notice in his reaction? This is the father hearing of this second dream.
Thank God, and your mother will bow down to you.
Right.
There's at first a natural response of, don't forget your place, young man, right? That any father might feel when a son is saying, I'm going to be your ruler. But what's his secondary response? I saw your hand, April.
Well, I was just thinking in this patriarchal time period, he was the patriarch of the whole family, the leader, and just it probably sounded arrogant and disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
But does it say that he remembered these things or he treasured these things?
Yeah, verse 11.
Yeah, but his father kept the saying in mind, similar to some other stories. You remember some other times where people kept these things in mind? Mary, right? Yeah, she's seeing the things that Jesus does, and she just treasures that in her heart and ponders it, considers it. That's the good example, right, that we should have. When something doesn't seem quite right, but it could be from God, let's not react with this response that these brothers do. Let's consider these things in our hearts and ponder them to have a more patient response. Yeah, Nor?
Yeah, if you think about this, under the traditions that they're in, Joseph is a long way from being the head of the family, which would be the head of this great family that's going to be like the stars of the heavens, and you would expect Reuben and all those folks, and And later on, of course, Israel with the blessings is going to get the message from God on all of that. But I mean, he is right now. He's about almost as far as you can get from being at the front of that line. And so you can imagine some of the confusion maybe at that time.
You see,
It follows the pattern, though, right? Because God is choosing the younger. It's God's choice. He's the potter, we're the clay. You know, who are we to answer? You know, why did you make me this way? And so he chooses the younger, the one who's not, you know, deserving. Now, Joseph does show himself to be of greater character than his brothers. But what did he say about Jacob and Esau? Before you were even born, I chose Jacob. Before they had done anything good or bad. And so that's God's choosing. And so the lesson for us in Christ that's given so often in the New Testament is he has the right to choose those who are in Christ, those who are in his Son, and to reject everyone else. Norm?
Again, it's the example of the spiritual or the heart over the physical. We're going to see it again in David. Same thing. Youngest gets chosen. Again, it's the spiritual, it's the heart over, and God sees the heart.
God sees the heart.
That's right. And he certainly did choose a good heart here in Joseph. Let's observe that some before our time runs out. So what did Joseph's brothers want to do with him? They've hated him because of his dreams, and now his father sends him to where they are pasturing the flock. He comes all the way down to Dothan, and as he's coming, what's their plan?
And throw him in a pit.
Yeah.
Don't miss that initial plan, right? We know he gets sold into Egypt, which is a tragic way to treat a family member, but their original plan was to just kill him, and the pit was going to just be the place of disposal for the body. Here comes this dreamer, verse 19, and then verse 20, then let us see what will become of his dreams. I think it's important to note that it's these dreams that are sent by God that are what these brothers are rejecting. And they are completely uninterested in the fulfillment of these dreams, and they're not considering the fact that they're fighting against God and that's a futile effort. So how is it that his life is preserved?
Comes to this, it says, you know, like he's our flesh and blood. You know, we probably shouldn't kill him.
Right. Yeah, and
Maybe as the head of the family, the oldest, right? He's not wanting to have this guiltiness, this blood guiltiness on his hands and have to answer for it to his father. And so he wants to rescue them out of his hands, but says, let's just throw him into this pit. And what's his plan?
he's going to come back and
Get him out. And so before he can do that, who comes up with the new plan?
Well, the brothers sit down to have lunch, and they see these Ishmaelites coming, and they decide, hey, why don't we just sell them to the Ishmaelites?
It was Judah.
It was Judah who comes up with this plan. And it does, of course, spare Joseph's life, but I don't know that Judah's motivation is to spare his life. It's more just how can we profit from this, right? And so killing a brother doesn't profit you anything, but selling him does. And so they see this opportunity with the Ishmaelites. What else are they called, this group that they sell Joseph to?
they're called
Midianites. And Brother Waldron mentioned one of the words is actually Midianites. Midian was another location, but all of those were descendants of Ishmael, if I understand. And so this, there's no discrepancy here. It's just an understanding that these tribes may have merged and perhaps become an interchangeable use of the same term. So all descended from Ishmael. So family in a distant way, but they're headed down to Egypt, right? And so his life is preserved by being sold as a slave. So he's not put to death, but heads down to Egypt. Anything else on question 4? So we skip over 38. We've already studied 38 and come to chapter 39, and the story picks back up with Joseph in Egypt. Now, how was God with Joseph in Egypt? He's sold by this group of Ishmaelites to a man named Potiphar. Who was Potiphar?
Sir Pharaoh.
He's an
Officer
officer.
of Pharaoh. So he's now in a very powerful man's house. Specifically, it says that he was captain of the guard or captain of the bodyguard. And so probably in this, not only a military man, but in that inner circle with Pharaoh himself. And so he's in this man's house. He's now one of his slaves. And how is God with him? It says he became successful, verse 2.
He did to prosper.
Everything he did prospered. And Potiphar observed this. He saw that the Lord was with Joseph. And so, wanting to prosper himself, he says, well, I'm going to put everything under Joseph. So, what was Joseph's part in receiving this blessing? Let's not miss that. Of course, God is with Joseph, but what does Joseph have to do? He was righteous, yeah. He's having faith in God. We're going to see that even more so as the story continues. But what else?
Character and the way he conducted himself.
Right.
I mean, Potiphar's not going to just want to put anyone he can't trust and have confidence in their leadership abilities and effectiveness in that position.
That's right.
Because he mentioned, everything under Joseph.
Yeah.
He's got to be a trustworthy servant. Norm?
Similarities to Daniel here,
Yeah.
in the kind of character that he had. And again, following God's law in physical things, the Creator, who knows how things work, Joseph wasn't doing this miraculously. I mean, he was doing the right things, and it was benefiting everybody around him by being righteous.
Yeah.
You think how encouraging the story of Daniel must have been to the children of Israel in exile when they get almost an exact retelling of the story of Joseph happening right there among them, where one of their own is sold off into the most powerful nation on the earth, and one receives dreams and is escalated to this prominent position. And so the same thing happens there with Daniel. That's right. Joseph had to be a faithful young man. If he was upset that, I thought I had this dream from you, God, and now I'm, being sold into slavery, and so he's just unwilling to do anything to help himself or to serve others, he's not going to be elevated the way that he was. So how did Joseph now resist sexual temptation with Potiphar's wife? What were some of the specific ways that he avoided falling into that trap?
Refused to be with her.
He refused to be with her. And as the second in the house, he had all authority, right? Potiphar's only concern was what?
Just
Food.
What am I going to eat today? That's all he had to concern himself with. So Joseph's got all the power. And so this woman is throwing herself at him, offering him to have sex with her. And he resists. But his tactics to avoid that temptation are what?
It is a great wickedness against God.
Right.
His mindset is an excellent example for us. It's a focus on God. It's also a mindset of humility, right? His position, even though it is great, he says, verse 9, there's no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. And so he's got a mindset of his proper position. But he says, how then could I do this great evil and sin against God? That's an important mindset for us to keep all the time, to recognize that our our standing before God is what's most important. Was that sin simply and only against God? In a sense, you see in Psalm 51, David even says, against you and you alone have I sinned. Speaking to God. Sin is a transgression that God holds against us. And yes, he had sinned against Uriah, he'd sinned against Bathsheba, but so much greater than that is his sin against God, because God is the one who holds us to account. And so Joseph has that mindset, and it keeps him from going where he should not. That's what we need to have as well. Any other thoughts on Joseph's great example here? Clarissa?
And it was day after day. Like, so day after day, he's having, I'm sure he's trying to avoid her as much as possible, but they're obviously in the same household. So it's just something that he had to deal with daily until up to the point where he literally had to flee. So.
Yeah.
If you find yourself in that situation where there's a temptation and it's day after day after day, what should you be doing to resist? How do you keep this mindset that Joseph had?
Prayer, study.
Shouldn't just wait till
The
the
Lord's Day to open your Bible, right? Probably need to be looking at God's Word. You need to be meditating on it, studying it, remembering your position. This spiritual mindset doesn't just naturally happen. Joseph just happened to be a spiritually minded guy. No, he's got to focus his mind on God. And we've got to do the same. We've got to take every thought captive to control ourselves. Norm?
Most of the time we think, I'd be looking for another job, but there's certain circumstances where you can't look for another job. He's in one of them. He's a slave. He's not going to go and find another job unless he gets sold. And sometimes we get into that situation and we just have to gut it out. And that's a great lesson here from Joseph. He just did what was right until what happened.
That's right.
So he, when he's now been caught, right? He's in the house with her, didn't want to be there alone with her, but he's there because of his work. And now she grabs him and says, lie with me. He leaves his garment in her hand and flees, showing just a great example. He's willing to sacrifice everything to get away and to avoid this sin. But she then has his garment, and she's able to use that in her lie to say that he came in there to make sport of me, right? And so she lies to her husband and says that it was Joseph who was the aggressor. A great example that just because a woman makes an accusation, is it always true? Even from ancient times, there were women who lied about what a man does. So great wisdom for any man, any husband, any preacher, elder, whatever, to remember that these accusations can come, and it's not good to be alone with a woman if you can avoid that if she's not your wife. And so Joseph ends up in prison. This doesn't necessarily seem to be the appropriate punishment for the crime of trying to rape your master's wife. So that has led some to assume that Potiphar might not have believed his wife's story and gives him kind of the minimum punishment of just imprisoning him. But we'll pick up there with question 7 next week and talk a little bit more. I want you to look at Psalm 105 and notice what it says there about Joseph.